Hey guys! So today I am going to give you 8 free ways that you can become fluent in English. So some of these ways are going to involve other people and some of them you can just do by yourself. So let's start with the ones that you can do on your own. The first way is to listen to podcasts. This is an amazing way to improve your listening skills. It's also a really great way to improve your vocabulary and just general understanding of how English words are actually used, because oftentimes the way that we actually use words are a little bit different than what the definition might be. So I recommend that you listen to more than one podcast regularly. So pick maybe 2 or 3 podcasts that you really like and listen to them at least once a week. Some podcasts are every day, so you can listen to them every day. One podcast that I am currently listening to every day is called Undisputed. It is a podcast that is about American sports. So if you like learning about American sports, then this is a fun one. It's between 2 different men and they argue about sports. So it's really fun because you get lots of fun English vernacular and you get lots of little expressions that we like to say for kind of having a fun, casual conversation with a friend. It's a really great way to see how we do that. I will make sure that I put the link for that podcast and for everything that I recommend in this video in the description below so that you guys can check those things out. And if you do use one of the resources that I tell you about, let me know how you like it. So another podcast that I really like is Bethenny Frankel's podcast. I believe it's called Just Be. I just like Bethenny, so I really enjoy listening to her podcast. When you choose the podcast that you want to listen to, I recommend that you have at least one that is mostly just one person talking, and then at least one that is more than one person talking. So my sports podcast, my Undisputed podcast, that is one where you have 2 people talking back and forth the whole time. This is really great because they give like little reactions to each other like, You kind of just see how people interact when they're not talking in a conversation. You see how people naturally interrupt someone when they're having a conversation all in a fun, friendly way. And so getting that from having 2 people in the podcast is really nice. The other great thing about this one is it's also on YouTube, so you can just listen to it. But then you can also see little snippets of it because it is a TV show on YouTube, and so you can see people talking and reacting physically as well, because physical body language is also a big part of communication in English. When you listen to a podcast with just one person, you kind of get to hear someone's thoughts uninterrupted, talking out loud. And this would be also something that is similar to how you would speak to someone that you know pretty well most of the time. But this way they're not getting interrupted. It's just kind of a different way of using language. Not super different, but just a little bit different. So that is nice. On Bethenny's podcast, she will do these rants, which I think are so fun. They're hilarious. I definitely recommend that you check some of them out. And so she'll do these rants at the beginning of every podcast. And so that is a fun way for you to definitely pick up some language and just get an understanding of just how Americans complain. We love to complain. So it's really a great way to do that. And then she also interviews people, so it's nice to get that little interaction as well. But it doesn't really matter which podcast you choose. It should just be in a topic that you're interested in. As long as the person that is speaking on the podcast is a native speaker, you are good to go. One of the things that I recommend you do when you're listening to podcasts, maybe not every time, but maybe once a week, I recommend that you actually pause the podcast. So listen to what the person is saying, pause it, and then repeat what you think they said. This way you can really focus on your listening skills and make sure that you're understanding what you're hearing. And if there are any words that they say that you don't know, you should Google them and look them up. But don't just look at the definition of the word. Make sure you're also looking at sentences with the word in it. So sometimes you might want to Google whatever the word is in a sentence, like mediocre in a sentence. And then that way you can actually see how people use it, because just because you understand the definition of the word does not mean that you understand how to use the word. You can definitely check out some of my playlists that I have that go over vocabulary. There is lots of vocabulary on this channel, and you'll definitely learn how we actually use these words. And I only choose words and phrases that we actually use. Another way that you can use a podcast is you can use it to improve your writing skills. And so one of the things that you can do if you're listening to a debate show like Undisputed, the sports one that I mentioned, or even with Bethenny's podcast, because she is very opinionated, is whatever topic they're talking about, you can form your own opinion. One time, Bethenny went on a rant about vegetables, so you could even form your opinion about vegetables. And what you can do is you can actually write down what your opinion is. So I think this about vegetables, I agree with this. So you could say something like, vegetables are boring, and that would be your main idea. And then you could write down 2 or 3 ways to support that. So 2 or 3 reasons why vegetables are boring. I happen to think you're wrong, but you can have whatever opinion you want. And this is just a good way to write your thoughts down, improve your writing skills, but also just improve your skills of thinking in English, and then just taking your practice beyond the podcast. So you're not just listening, you're not just repeating, but you kind of get to get everything in there. You can also sometimes find transcripts of these podcasts, and you can read those over and follow along as well. So that's a great way to help with your reading skills. You can also see the tone that people use and how they say words when they're really serious or they're being emotional. Because in English, so often it's not about the words you're using, it's about how you use them, and podcasts can really, really help you understand that. I also just happen to think it's fun to yell at the podcast. You know, if they're debating something about sports, especially, I'm very opinionated with sports. If they're debating something about sports and someone has an opinion that I don't agree with, I love yelling at the TV, because I like to watch my podcast on YouTube. I love yelling at the TV and telling them why they're wrong. So you can do that too. That's a great way to interact as well. So don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to interact. Yell at the TV. Yell at your phone if that's where you're listening to your podcast. Sometimes I'll be listening to a podcast while I'm driving in the car, and they'll say something, and then I will literally pause the podcast and just go on my own little rant about what I think about what they're talking about. Do that. That's a great way for you to naturally react in English. It's a great way for you to be thinking in English. And yeah, Americans do that all the time. So I think that's part of being fluent, is to act like us and just yell at the TV or yell at your phone. Just react to whatever it is that somebody is saying. All right, so the next way is to watch TV. I know some of you guys love to do this one. So watching TV, much like listening to podcasts, is a great way to get vocabulary and to see how words are actually used. I would say the difference between the two is podcasts are a little more natural, because you really just get people talking in real life and real world situations. But TV is so fun. It's fun to get engrossed into a show. And I mean, they are using the language in a natural way. So it is a great way to learn things. So that's a great way to kind of learn English in a way where you don't have to be so active. You're probably not screaming at a TV show in the way that you might be screaming at a podcast because someone's giving an opinion. So it's a little more relaxed, and you have a lot to choose from. I happen to be going through Locke and Key, which is on Netflix, and just going through different vocabulary from there. You can check that out on my channel. I will put the playlist for that in the description below so that you can follow along with that too. But any TV show that you enjoy, you should absolutely watch that. Write down any words you don't know. Again, look them up. Make sure you look them up in a sentence so that you're able to use them correctly. but it's a really great way to just add to your vernacular. Sometimes you'll see more obscure words on a TV show, certainly more obscure words than you will on a podcast. A podcast is literally just someone talking, whereas a TV show, it's much more planned out. A TV show is a great way to just make sure that you're staying in touch with English. Next one, read the newspaper. So the next one is to read the newspaper. I think this one is really important because when you're becoming fluent in English, I think it's important to interact with at least one serious thing every week. So usually when you are watching a TV series, even if it's a drama, it's probably not really going to be that serious. And with podcasts, they tend to be just people talking and it's casual. Unless you're listening to NPR as your podcast, it's probably not going to be something that serious. And it's important to understand how people talk about really serious topics. And so reading the newspaper once a week is a good way to do that. It doesn't really matter which newspaper you read. Keep in mind a lot of newspapers these days are slanted, either to the left or the right. So you're not always getting the most unbiased opinion, but you're not really reading the newspaper in order to get an opinion. You're reading it in order to see how people talk about things that are more serious. You're probably going to encounter vocabulary that's a little bit different. Definitely vocabulary that we still use in our daily life when we're talking about non-serious things. You just are probably going to get more of it when you're talking about or reading about a serious topic. It's also going to help you think in a more intellectual way, maybe think more critically. You don't really have to think when you're watching a TV series. You don't need to have an opinion. You could just kind of sit back and enjoy the show. When it's a podcast, you kind of just have like your knee-jerk reaction. Yeah, he's right. No, you're wrong. Whatever it is. But when you're reading the newspaper and you're talking about more serious issues, you tend to kind of think a little bit more when you're forming your opinion. You tend to have more evidence and more reasoning behind what you're thinking, or even just if you're judging what the person is writing. You don't necessarily have to form an opinion. You can just look at their opinion and really just kind of think about it. So it gets you viewing and thinking about English in a little bit of a different way. Now, I happen to like The Economist, which technically isn't a newspaper, but it's that kind of serious publication. I like it because they have a lot of smart writers. They talk about interesting topics. It's not something that I read constantly all the time, but it is something that I do like to read from time to time. So if you're looking for something serious to read, then that is a really good one. The next tip is to read blogs. You can read blogs about anything that you like. It does not matter. This is another more everyday conversational way of speaking, but it's probably not going to be in quite the same way as a TV show, which is something that's scripted. So someone really took the time to plan out what everyone was going to say. And then with the podcast, it's really off the cuff and you're just kind of saying whatever. But when someone's writing something down, they tend to read it over a couple times. They probably have some sort of an outline about what it is that they want to talk about, more of a goal. And so you're going to get, like, again, just a little bit different of a version of English when you read a blog, no matter what the topic is. I happen to love travel blogs, and I will definitely give you some recommendations of my favorites in the description. I also have this science blog that I really like. It's technically for kids, but like super smart. I graduated college at 14 kids. It's really interesting. I love the way that they present the topics and the information. And I'm not like a huge science buff, but I really enjoy it. So I will put the link for that one in the description below as well. I recommend that you check it out. If you like it, tell me. I recommend it to people all the time. So the last one that you can do all by yourself is to watch YouTube. Oh, you guys are doing that right now. So So you know the benefits of watching YouTube. It's another way to get a look at someone just talking. And you have so many different kinds of channels. Obviously, you have channels that teach you English, but you have channels that entertain you. You have channels that talk about TV shows. I mean, you have all kinds of channels that are out there where you can really just kind of pick what you want. And the cool thing about it is that everyone talks a little bit differently. Everyone has a little bit of a different vernacular, and that can be really fun. And you're going to pick up different language, different vocabulary, different ways of speaking, different slang, depending on who it is you are listening to or who it is you're watching. And you'll also see how different people use different words in different situations, which is nice as well and will definitely help you become more fluent. All right, so now on to some ways that you can interact with other people for free. So speaking of YouTube, one of the things that you should do is write in the comments. So when you write in the comments, it gives you an opportunity to talk to other people. Whether it's a video like this, which is about helping you become fluent in English, or whether it's a video that's about entertainment or something completely different, writing in the comments is a great way to communicate with people. If you are writing in the comments for a video that's about some TV show, then you might be interacting with native speakers in the comments. And so you can go back and forth. You can read comments and see how people react to certain videos, the language that they use. Now, sometimes the comments are rude and gross, I know, but a lot of times comments are really nice and positive, and they can just be a nice way to see how people react to things. You also may be able to strike up little conversations with people in the comments, which is nice because you get that back and forth interaction. And when you're becoming fluent, you really need that. The person who made the video might also respond to some of your comments as well. I know sometimes certain YouTubers will just have full-on conversations in the comment section, especially with people that have been commenting on their videos for a long time. So it's a great way for you to kind of practice speaking or speaking in a writing way for free. I know that if you write a comment in one of my videos, I am pretty likely to respond as long as I have time. Sometimes I will even correct your English because I'm an English teacher and it's what I do. So writing in the comments is a really great way to get an interaction with a native speaker. It really does mimic a real conversation. Another thing that's going to mimic a real conversation is Reddit. So pick things that you're interested in. Of course, you can join groups about learning English, but do that. But also find one or two groups or one or two subreddits that are about other things that you're interested in, hobbies, things like that, where people are speaking in English, because that gives you another opportunity to have little interactions with native speakers. That way you can see, do people understand what I'm saying? How do people respond to me? Short of having an actual verbal conversation with someone, it's a really great way for you to be able to have real interactions with native speakers. I recommend that you join 2 or 3, and this is excluding any of them that are about learning English. So yes, join one about learning English if you want to, and there are lots of native speakers in there too, but for better results, join 2 or 3 that have nothing to do with learning English. It will be a great way for you to be able to interact with native speakers. You don't have to worry about making mistakes or anything like that. If you make mistakes, people will just ignore them. They're not going to be like me. They're not going to correct you. So don't expect people to correct you when you're doing something like that, but you will be able to communicate, and you'll be able to see how people respond to your English, and it'll kind of be like getting dumped in an English-speaking country, because you'll kind of have to navigate what people are saying. Obviously, you're only going to be dumped in that English-speaking country for however long you're in that Reddit thread, but it is kind of something similar, because people are not going to correct you. They're going to say what they're going to say. They're going to react how they're going to react, and you just kind of have to figure it out, but that's a great way to mimic that. Speaking of mimicking people, that is the next tip. Mimic people. This is how we all learn every single language as kids. So you want to repeat that as much as possible. So listen to something in English and repeat it. This is something you can do with a podcast. This is something you can do on YouTube with a TV series. Whatever it is, just listen to something in English and repeat whatever it is the person says. This will definitely help you with your pronunciation. It will absolutely help you with tone. So how people say something, that is so important. I cannot stress that enough. The way that someone says something in English is everything. You can slow down the speed to YouTube videos. You can also do the same oftentimes when it comes to watching something on your computer. And so if you need to slow down the speed, then do that. I think that's even better than subtitles, because then you are still relying on your own ear to hear it. And on YouTube, I think you have 3 different speeds that you can use to slow down a video. I'm about to start some imitation videos, so you can mimic what I say in these videos. I will make sure that that gets posted in the description below as well. If you want to be fluent in English, you don't have to pay a bunch of money. You don't necessarily have to move to an English-speaking country to do it. There are so many resources out there to help you. Take a look at the resources that I give you. Take a look at my imitation and mimicking videos so that you can learn how we really do use words. You can learn how we discuss certain topics. And most importantly, you can feel confident and you can build your fluency. I'll see you in that video. Until next time.